King Charles just stripped Camilla from royal title. After SX video got leaked, I have seen this video of Camilla in a tape, and it was shocking. It looked like a movie straight from an adult website. Bizarre. The palace has survived scandals, betrayals, and even tragedy, but nothing prepared the world for this. A leaked video sent shockwaves through Buckingham Palace, and within hours, King Charles made the most ruthless decision of his reign. He stripped Camilla of her royal title. No ceremony, no warning, just a stroke of his pen that erased her family from history. The woman who had waited decades to stand beside him was cut down in silence, and the crown itself trembled. But was this really about scandal? Or was it the ghost of Diana still shaping the monarchy from beyond the grave? The silent decree. Inside Buckingham Palace, there are moments when time feels like it stands still, and this was one of them. No cameras were flashing, no royal trumpets echoed through the marble halls, and no ceremony marked the occasion. Instead, it was just King Charles, a sheet of parchment, and the unbearable silence of a room where history was about to shift. Those who were close enough to witness it said the atmosphere was heavy, as though the very walls of the palace understood what was about to unfold. It wasn't a meeting. It wasn't a discussion. It was a reckoning in ink. The corridors outside the royal chamber buzzed with whispers. Trusted aides carried files in their hands, but moved with hesitation, pausing as if they already knew something extraordinary was happening behind the closed doors. Faces were pale, movements hurried but tense, and no one dared to ask questions. It was the kind of silence that spoke louder than any announcement. The hush carried through the palace like a warning. Something irreversible was about to be done. Inside the Queen's gallery, where paintings of past monarchs stared down from gilded frames, Charles sat alone at a polished table. Before him lay the royal decree, its blank lines trembling under the weight of consequence. His expression gave nothing away, but his eyes carried storms. For a man who had spoken for years about unity and tradition, his hand trembled only slightly as it hovered above the page. When the pen finally touched the parchment, it was as though the air itself stopped breathing. Even the guards outside felt it, a shift in the atmosphere that made them straighten without knowing why. The signing itself was quick. One stroke, then another, neat, deliberate, cold. And with each line of ink, Camilla's family was erased from the sacred royal list. Her children and grandchildren, once woven into the public fabric of ceremonies and appearances, were wiped clean in seconds. No explanation, no review, not even a whisper of debate. They were gone as though they had never belonged at all. Those who later described the moment said, "It felt like the king had drawn a sword and cut away living flesh from the monarchy itself." When the pen was set down, Charles didn't look at anyone. The room remained frozen. Aides glanced at each other, eyes wide but mouths sealed, too loyal or too terrified to react. The silence was unbearable, like the pause before a storm breaks. The decree lay on the table, its ink still glistening under the soft light. A quiet piece of paper, carrying the weight of betrayal and finality. Outside, the news had not yet reached the world, but within those walls, everyone present knew they had just watched history being rewritten. For years, Camilla's family had walked the palace halls quietly, slipping into royal life one step at a time. And in a single signature, King Charles had stripped it all away. The decision was ruthless, not because of its speed, but because of its silence. There were no words to soften it, no speeches to justify it, just ink and finality. As the aides left the room, their footsteps echoed like thunder in the stillness of Buckingham Palace. Some clutched their papers tighter, Others walked as though their legs could barely carry them. None dared speak of what they had seen. A line had been crossed, and everyone knew the monarchy would never be the same again. For Charles, it wasn't simply a decision. It was a declaration. And for Camilla, though she didn't know it yet, it was the beginning of a storm that would shatter everything she had built. Camilla's family wiped out. For years, Camilla's children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, had lived in that delicate space between public curiosity and royal indifference. They weren't Windsors by blood, but their quiet presence at ceremonies and family events slowly wove them into the tapestry of the monarchy. They were never announced as heirs, but they didn't need to be. Their seats at the front rows of royal occasions, their casual appearances alongside dignitaries, and their increasing comfort within the palace walls told a story of gradual acceptance. To the outside world, it seemed like Charles had quietly opened the gates for them, allowing Camilla's family to stand closer to the crown than anyone had ever imagined possible. And then, without warning, it was gone. Stripped, erased, as if it had never existed at all. The decree did not suspend their presence. It didn't leave room for a future review. It erased them completely. That ruthless precision left everyone asking the same question: why now? What pushed Charles, a man known for patience and careful consideration, to take such a drastic step with no warning? Inside the palace, whispers carried through the corridors like smoke. Some said it was about politics, a move to protect the throne's sacred bloodline from being blurred by association. Others believed the king was haunted by the discovery of Diana's letter, that chilling message from the past urging him to protect his sons and their future children from outsiders who may one day claim the crown through charm or manipulation. For Charles, those words weren't just a memory, they were prophecy. And with Camilla's children rising so quietly, so steadily, perhaps the king saw the warning fulfilled before his eyes. But there were darker theories too. The leaked scandal that exploded in the press had already shaken the monarchy's fragile image. Camilla's name was suddenly linked to whispers that could stain the entire royal family. Erasing her children from the line of succession wasn't just about tradition. It was damage control. If their names vanished from royal history, so too did any chance of the scandal being tied to the crown's legacy. For those who had worked closest with Camilla, the decision felt personal. They remembered her steady patience over the years, her refusal to demand titles or make noise. She had played the long game, guiding her children into spaces once reserved for blood heirs. To see it undone in a single stroke of the pen felt like more than a strategic move. It felt like betrayal. The man she had stood beside for decades had chosen the crown over her family, and the timing made it all the more brutal. On the surface, nothing seemed out of place. The monarchy was stable, the public had grown warmer to Camilla, and her family's presence no longer raised eyebrows. Everything appeared calm. That calmness made the king's action feel like a sword plunged without warning into the heart of his own household. The question remained unanswered as the ink dried on the decree. Was this the king protecting his crown, or was it something more human? Fear, guilt, or even the shadow of a promise he once made long ago. Whatever the reason, the move was final. Camilla's children and grandchildren were gone from the royal legacy, and the silence around that decision only deepened the mystery. It wasn't just a change in paperwork. It was a ruthless erasure, the kind of move that leaves scars not only on a family, but on the monarchy itself. The letter that changed everything. The discovery of the letter was like a whisper from the grave, a voice that refused to be silenced by time. It wasn't found in some grand unveiling or announced with fanfare. Instead, it appeared quietly during a routine archival review deep inside Windsor's vaults, where decades of royal secrets were sealed away. An aide sorting through boxes of correspondence paused when they saw the familiar crest. The envelope was small, delicate, but unmistakable. Diana's personal mark stared back at them, her handwriting still alive on the page. For a moment, the room seemed to grow colder. When Princess Anne was handed the envelope, she froze. Those close to her said her face drained of color as if she had seen a ghost. She locked herself in a private room before daring to open it, her hands trembling as she broke the fragile seal. Inside, in Diana's unmistakable script, was a plea, a warning written years earlier, long before Charlotte was even born. Diana begged Charles to protect their sons and their children's future, not just from the glare of the public, but from something far more insidious: outsiders creeping too close to the crown. Her words were not bitter, but fearful. She spoke of manipulation, charm, and ambition that could one day blur the bloodline. Her final plea was clear and sharp: protect the bloodline, protect the future Diana. Anne didn't cry, though her eyes were red when she emerged. She didn't announce what she had found. She simply delivered the letter directly to Charles with no explanation. Those who saw him receive it said he sat in silence for a long time, staring at the envelope as if it had burned his hands. When he finally opened it, the palace might as well have gone still. Diana's words, written decades earlier, now cut into him with the weight of prophecy. She had seen this moment coming, and she had begged him to stop it, and he had failed. In his private study, Charles read the letter again and again, each line striking deeper than the last. Witnesses described him later as pale, shaken, withdrawn, his usual composure stripped away. He wasn't a king in that moment. He was a man confronted by his past, haunted by the ghost of the woman who had once loved and then defied him. Diana wasn't gone. Her voice was alive, echoing across time, urging him to do what she believed he had always been too weak to do: draw a line to protect the Windsor bloodline. And so, with guilt pressing heavy on his chest, Charles made his choice. The decree wasn't just an act of power. It was an answer to Diana's voice. Erasing Camilla's family wasn't about ceremony or scandal anymore. It was about silencing a ghost that refused to rest. He wasn't honoring his queen. He was obeying his late wife. The irony cut as deeply as the decree itself. Camilla, who had waited patiently for her place at his side, was undone by a letter, written by the woman who had once stood there before her. It wasn't just history repeating itself. It was history reaching out from the grave, dragging Charles back into the shadows he thought he had escaped. And as the ink dried on his decree, it was Diana's words, not his own, that seemed to echo through the palace halls. From betrayal to revenge. Camilla didn't know what had been signed until it was already too late. The summons had arrived at Clarence House with the kind of formality that carried no explanation, just a command. His Majesty requests your immediate presence at Buckingham Palace. She entered the palace as she had so many times before, her heels clicking against the marble floors. But there was something different in the air. The silence wasn't the usual dignified hush of royal halls. It was sharp, heavy, suffocating. Staff froze when they saw her. Conversations cut mid-sentence. Eyes darted away as though they couldn't bear to meet hers. It was near the royal chamber where the truth first hit her. Two aides, standing stiffly by a column, whispered without realizing how close she was. Their words were barely audible, but one of them muttered, "It's done." Those two words cut deeper than any insult ever could. She didn't need context. She knew instantly. Her instincts filled in the blanks, and the weight of it crushed her. Camilla's knees gave out on the cold stone floor, and the queen consort collapsed in the heart of the palace, not from illness, but from betrayal. Witnesses never forgot that moment. A woman who had endured decades of scrutiny, scandal, and public scorn now lay sobbing on the marble outside the royal chamber. She had been mocked by the press, vilified by Diana's loyalists, and judged by millions. But never had she been broken like this. Those who rushed to help her described her as almost unrecognizable. Her composure shattered, her body trembling, her sobs echoing down the corridors like the cry of someone who had just lost everything. And the man she trusted most, the man she had waited decades to stand beside, refused to open the door. But grief is a dangerous thing. It rarely stays soft for long. As they lifted her to her feet, something inside her shifted. The sobbing stopped. Her tears dried, and in their place came something harder, sharper. Her shoulders straightened, her eyes, still red, turned cold. She walked away with slow, deliberate steps, her silence heavier than any outburst could have been. That was the moment her sorrow began to rot into rage. She had been blindsided not only as a queen, but as a mother. Her family wasn't just pushed aside. They were erased from history with one stroke of a pen. No discussion, no warning, no chance to fight. And Camilla, who had spent years moving like smoke through the palace, quiet and patient, suddenly felt the fire ignite. By the time she exited Buckingham Palace, her reputation in tatters and her title reduced to ash, she wasn't thinking of pleading or repairing what was broken. She was planning. Her revenge wouldn't come with shouting or scandal in the open. It would come with whispers, quiet leaks, and subtle strikes that would unravel the crown's carefully guarded image. Charles may have silenced her family on paper, but Camilla carried something far more dangerous than a title. She carried secrets, and she was ready to let them burn. Camilla fights back. The palace thought silence would end it. They believed that once the decree was signed, the matter would vanish into the shadows, sealed away like countless other scandals before it. But they underestimated Camilla. She had spent years learning how the monarchy operated, how it fed on control and appearances, how it relied on silence as both shield and sword. And if Charles had used silence to erase her family, Camilla would use it to strike back. It began quietly, almost unnoticeably. A small article appeared in a French newspaper, tucked between columns about politics and the arts. Just a few lines, barely more than gossip, hinting at betrayal behind Buckingham Palace's gilded doors. The story didn't name names, didn't offer details, but it was enough to stir questions. A queen consort cut off, a family erased, and whispers of a storm no one outside the palace had seen coming. Within days, those whispers traveled. German tabloids seized on it next, followed by Italian magazines. Soon, the foreign press was alive with speculation, and by the time it reached British shores, the story had grown teeth. Reporters called it the quiet rebellion of a silenced queen. Camilla hadn't given an interview, hadn't made a statement, hadn't even been seen in public since her collapse in the palace corridors. But her absence only fed the fire. Every headline, every rumor, every grain of speculation pointed in one direction, toward her. This was no accident. Friends close to Camilla knew she was too measured, too calculating to act recklessly. The leaks were deliberate. A carefully timed whisper campaign designed to bleed into the press without ever revealing her hand. She didn't need to scream her betrayal. She allowed others to do it for her. Each rumor, each story, each headline was a wound to the monarchy's carefully crafted image, and all without Camilla ever appearing to lift a finger. Inside Buckingham Palace, panic set in. Meetings stretched late into the night. Lawyers drafted letters of denial. Press officers scrambled to issue statements, each one more desperate than the last. But for every denial the palace gave, 2 new stories surfaced. Staffers whispered about diaries Camilla may have kept, recordings she may have hidden, conversations she may have written down. No one could confirm if any of it existed, but the fear was enough, and fear spreads faster than truth. The monarchy had always survived scandal, affairs, divorces, even tragedy. But this was different. This was a war from within. Camilla wasn't just threatening Charles's decision. She was threatening the crown's ability to control the story. And in a family that had built its survival on controlling the narrative, that was the deadliest strike of all. For the public, opinions split down the middle. Some saw Camilla as a victim, a woman betrayed by a man who chose duty over love. Others painted her as vindictive, a scorned queen trying to drag the monarchy into chaos. But either way, the damage was done. Camilla didn't need the crown to make her voice heard anymore. With every whisper, she reminded the palace that what Charles had taken from her family on paper, she could take back in the spotlight. And this was only the beginning. A divided palace. While the press feasted on whispers and the world debated loyalties, the real storm was inside Buckingham Palace. The walls that had survived centuries of scandal suddenly felt unsteady, as if even the marble floors carried the tension. For years, William and Catherine had watched Camilla's children inch closer to the throne's orbit. Front row at ceremonies, private lunches with diplomats, quiet access to spaces reserved only for those with Windsor blood. They had tolerated it with polite smiles, but never with comfort. And when Charles signed the decree, they knew the balance had shifted forever. William didn't celebrate, though many thought he might. Instead, he grew more withdrawn. Those close to him noticed the way his composure cracked in private, the flicker of unease in his eyes whenever Camilla's name was mentioned. For William, the issue wasn't just about Camilla. It was about Charlotte. His daughter, still so young, carried not only her family's future, but also the lingering shadow of his mother, Diana. Every time Laura Lopes appeared at a royal function with that deliberate confidence, every time Tom Parker Bowles slipped into the spotlight with quiet ease, William felt the ground beneath Charlotte's future begin to tremble. Diana had fought for her sons to have a place untarnished by outsiders. And now, William saw history repeating itself around his daughter. Catherine, sharper and more protective by nature, noticed the shifts earlier. She had whispered to an aide that Laura's body language felt less like a guest and more like a claimant. In public, her nods toward Camilla grew shorter, her tone colder, her smiles tighter. Behind closed doors, her patience snapped. This wasn't just about tradition anymore. It was about protecting her children, especially Charlotte, from being overshadowed in their own birthright. And yet, amid all the fractures, something unexpected happened. The more chaotic the palace became, the more Charlotte seemed to shine. Too young to understand the politics, too innocent to grasp the weight of her name, she appeared in public with a calm grace that disarmed even the harshest critics. A simple wave from a palace window, a poised smile at a formal event, and suddenly the press began to draw comparisons to Diana. Not because of her looks, but because of her presence. They started calling her the future Diana, a symbol of warmth and hope in a monarchy unraveling at the seams. For the crown, that shift was both a blessing and a curse. Charlotte became the soft power holding the family together in the public eye. But for Charles, it was another reminder of the ghost he could never escape. Diana's prophecy wasn't just alive, It was living through his granddaughter. William and Catherine embraced it, protecting her fiercely, guarding her from the chaos that swirled through the palace halls. And though they never said it out loud, their silence carried the truth. Camilla's downfall wasn't only about scandal or succession. It was about making space for Charlotte, the child Diana seemed to have seen coming long before anyone else. The palace was divided. Charles stood alone in his guilt. Camilla plotted in the shadows. William and Catherine circled their children like shields. And at the center of it all, Princess Charlotte, unknowing yet undeniable, became the face of the monarchy's fragile hope. The more fractured the crown became, the brighter she seemed to shine. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.